It is becoming more and more clear that Yoshinobu Yamamoto is the New York Mets' top free agent target this offseason, partially because they don't believe they can realistically get in the mix on Ohtani. I want to break it all down on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Bob Nightingale did some reporting, but it was more of a notebook. He wrote an article for USA Today. And if you're not aware, Bob Nightingale is an MLB insider. He's a reporter. And it was basically just a list of all these things he was hearing at the GM meetings, which is always a really interesting read because it's not necessarily concrete reporting. It's not, oh, this is exactly what the team is thinking, but it's someone that's in these rooms that's hearing the conversations that can tell you what the rumblings are. And so in this, large notebook of different items that are brought up, one of the things that Bob Nightingale mentions, that the New York Mets have their eyes on Japanese ace Yoshinobu Yamamoto, believing they have no realistic chance to land Ohtani. He also had mentioned that Ohtani, if he doesn't sign with the Dodgers or the Angels, some executives predict that he'll end up with the Cubs or the Rangers, while the San Francisco Giants will offer the most money. So starting with the Ohtani discussion here, there is a sense that's been out there that maybe Ohtani would want to stay on the West Coast. And if he does, the Dodgers are going to give him a crazy offer. The Angels are going to give him a crazy offer. The Giants might give him the craziest offer. And any of those opportunities could be good fits for him. So he could really stay, put or, close to where he's at now and get paid the contract that he obviously deserves without having to put himself in an uncomfortable position to play in a market that he might not want to in New York City for, a long time, just because it's the best deal. He's going to get a lot of really good offers. And one thing I think that we have to understand about the position the Mets are in as the team with the deepest pocketbooks is that can be used against you. We're actually going to get to that in the final segment here, also from this notebook, with something on Craig Counsell using the Mets for leverage. But that is always on the table. The Mets being in the mix because, these agents want to keep them in the mix to drive up the price. If the Mets have had preliminary conversations with Ohtani's camp, or even, more notably haven't, while other teams have, they may already see the writing on the wall that he does not want to come to them. But even beyond that, I have spoken about this many times on the show over the last month and change here, that I don't necessarily think Ohtani is the perfect fit. While you can't deny the talent, he'd be an unbelievable ad, the Mets aren't a Shohei Ohtani away from a World Series right now. And I really think if you think about the goals of this organization moving forward, it's not the right way to spend the exorbitant amount of resources you're going to have to get this guy. Because I have said it before, I think that this is a season where you're not going to be able to solve everything through free agency. So for the Mets to get where they would potentially want to go and to be a real contender this year, it's going to take some internal growth. And they have to, over the next 2 seasons, really know what they have. Because I think there might be a point in time over the next 5 years where they will reset under that cap line, where they're going to reset their tax penalties and pull back a little bit on spending. That's not this year. They're way over. But you have to be really careful where you're spending your money, because you don't want to say, sign Shohei Ohtani, then Mark Vientos or Ronnie Mauricio or somebody shows themselves to be the type of a bat that could be your DH on the cheap. You want to leave just a pretty open avenue for the Jet Williams, Luis Angel Acuna, Drew Gilbert, those prospects who could be up in the next 2 years. You just want to know what you have. So to me, the idea that Yoshinobu Yamamoto is the Mets' top free agent target because they have no realistic chance to land Ohtani, part of that is, yes, go after the guy that might be interested in coming to you, of course, but it's also the guy that fits your roster needs way better. This is a team that needs to address their starting rotation if they're going to compete this year, but also moving forward, there is not a clear frontline starter for the Mets for the next 5 years. They have Senga, but Senga has an opt-out after year 3 that he could, very conceivably exercise. So to get that in a 25-year-old ace, I think that's really what's going on here is the Mets are looking at the market, they're looking at their team, the needs that they have, how they can, build a team that could compete in 2024. And if everything breaks right, they could be contenders that swing for the fences at the deadline potentially. But also with that clear understanding that 2025, 2026, 2027 is going to be a better window to contend in, and making sure that you really keep a lot of your possibilities open for that time. And so getting the starter that's going to headline your rotation, that's worth every penny. Paying for the two-way superstar at who knows how much money for who knows how many years and being just a Shohei Ohtani team, it is potentially a futile attempt to even get into that market, and it just might not be the best allocation of resources anyway. So what I want to do in the next segment is go through Yoshinobu Yamamoto's arsenal a little bit more, because there's a lot of information that I now can pull from here that can give you an even clearer picture as to why this guy is such an important free agent target for the Mets. Before we get to that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world today. It's always important to be prepared. Supply chain shortages for medications or an inability to get medications in a timely manner due to natural disaster or if you're traveling, this can all leave you unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case, providing 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. Jase handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy, medication delivery, and ongoing consultation and care. You can now customize your Jase case with dozens of add-on medications, and you can even add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Personally, my wife and I, we travel a lot, so whenever we go out of town, it's always nice to know that we have our Jase case with us, just in case anything unexpected pops up. We have that safety blanket. If you want to get one today, go to jasemedical.com and enter the code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON at Jase Medical, JASE medical.com. Do you want to become a Locked On Mets insider? We are now offering a texting service where you can communicate with me one-on-one, ask me whatever questions you want about the Mets. If you have a question after a show, I say some take that you think is ridiculous and you want to send me a reply, you can do all of that through subtext. All you have to do is find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/lockedonmets. Now, I have for a while been all in on the idea of Yoshinobu Yamamoto because he's 25 years old and his stats in the Nippon Professional Baseball League are just absolutely patently absurd. The dude has a sub-2 ERA in his career in over 1,000, well, not quite 1,000 innings pitched, but close to it. He's won 3 of their equivalent of the Cy Young Awards. He's won a couple of MVPs. The guy is an unbelievable pitcher. But luckily, I have a buddy of mine, Aram Layden, who is co-founder at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. And he has access to some databases where he can actually pull information on Yoshinobu Yamamoto. So he wrote an amazing article for us at justbaseball.com. He also put a video up on YouTube about it as well, really breaking down how good this guy is. And when you watch the video on Yoshinobu Yamamoto, what strikes me is just how much arm talent this guy has, because it's not a max effort delivery. It is very minimal effort. It's almost shocking how the ball can explode out of his hands from his height, from his unique arm angle that he takes. It's almost like a windup that has a slide step to it. It's so peculiar to watch this dude pitch, because it's just, you see him start the windup and then it's just boom, it's right on the hitter. It's not this windup that leads to a big leg kick. It's just steps back and then just explodes forward. And you just see it, even when he was pitching out of the stretch too, it's just so low effort and so much just based on arm talent. It's remarkable. And he's elite. He is an elite pitcher with a mix that should absolutely translate. He's not going to blow batters away with the fastball, but I'm going to pull this exactly from what Aram writes about in the article. He says qualities like release height, induced vertical break, vertical attack angle, extension, and of course velocity can all play key parts in deviating from the status quo. A big reason why Yamamoto should be able to make a smooth transition to the big leagues is that his fastball is easily a plus pitch. It sits near the mid-90s, occasionally touching the upper 90s, but it's the release height and shape that makes it so dominant. He goes on to talk about the release height of around 5.5 feet and how most fastballs in baseball come from a higher angle because guys are taller pitchers. Maybe they throw more over the top. This low release point is what creates this induced vertical break. Essentially, this allows Yoshinobu Yamamoto to work very effective up in the zone. It's almost that rising fastball, right? That you hear about. And it's really tough for hitters to try to get on top of that pitch. They're constantly going to be swinging under it. And so he's able to really work that pitch to either get strikeouts, to get early strikes in the beginning of the count where he can just attack the zone. And that's the difference between Yamamoto and Kodai Senga. Kodai Senga will walk the world at times. And then he'll also pitch himself out of those jams because he has a devastating pitch in his ghost fork. And, he really found something last year by going ghost fork, cutter, splitter, I'd say ghost fork and splitter. I'm looking at Yamamoto's splitter in this article, said that twice. For Senga last year, it was fastball, cutter, ghost fork. And that really became the mix that worked for him. He was able to find a way to start to attack the zone a little bit more, pitch to contact a little bit more, so the walks weren't hurting him as much as they were earlier in the season. And then the strikeout numbers were so good that he was able to get out of a lot of jams. Yamamoto is a pitcher that is going to be able to avoid walking as many batters and can potentially pitch deeper into games with his ability to pitch to contact. And I think the biggest difference between these two guys is that splitter or fork, however you want to describe the pitch. For Senga, yes, it disappears. It's amazing. Guys are going to swing through it like crazy. But Yamamoto, he lands the pitch for a strike. This was the biggest thing that I took away, I think, from this article that Aram wrote. The fact that he filled up the zone with that splitter, as Aram writes here, landing it for a strike more than 70% of the time, and he's willing to throw it in any count. Now, we saw the same thing from Senga this past year, where in the beginning of the season, it seemed like he was only going to his ghost fork when he got into a 2-strike count. And it was once he started to throw it earlier in counts, to throw it for a strike, to keep batters off balance, that's when everything sort of opened up for him. Yamamoto has the ability to do that, and they're going to swing through it as well. They're going to chase the pitch when it's out of the zone. Opponents hit just 170 on his splitter. They chased it 50% of the time. There's a swinging strike rate of 24%. all this information. Again, Aram pulled in his article. It really just shows you how effective the pitch is, especially because he's able to get ground balls with it. A ground ball rate of 76%. So you have the fastball, the splitter, a really good curveball that he's able to use as another strikeout pitch. He has the cutter similar to Senga that he's able to use where he can get those strikes. He can pound the zone with the cutter. You can get guys to roll that pitch over early in counts. It's a really good offering to continue to avoid walking batters, putting guys on. It's something you can attack with, especially, coming off, pairing that with the fastball, just giving different movements on the hard offerings that he has before he mixes in all the off-speed stuff, all the breaking stuff. And then the fifth pitch is one that he didn't throw much, the sweeper. And what Aram has discussed about his sweeper is it actually is a really good pitch. We saw Senga have a sweeper that he kind of, ended up tossing aside, but it wasn't the same level of a pitch. It was a pitch that wasn't necessarily as good as some of the top sweepers in Major League Baseball. Yamamoto could have one that it could be a very effective offering for him. And the difference between playing in the NPB and the MLB, as Aram notes here, is there's a lot more right-handed batters in Major League Baseball. In the NPB, it's a lot of lefties, and that sweeper is not going to be as effective. It's a good pitch to use against right-handed batters where it's going to tail completely away from them. That's what you want to get those swinging strikes, get guys to look bad swinging outside of the zone. So you add that in there as well. It is a legit 5-pitch mix from a guy that has a remarkably repeatable and simple motion, which would conceivably make him less of an injury risk. For a 25-year-old that even if you sign him to an 8-year deal, you're not even getting into his mid to late 30s. It's his early to mid 30s, even if it's a 9-year deal. So Yoshinobu Yamamoto makes so much sense for the Mets because in my eyes, he's pretty clearly the top starting pitcher available in free agency. And that age component just makes him so attractive to a team like the Mets that obviously wants to win next season, but sees a longer window coming in the future. He would fit that longer window, which makes, the whatever the salary investment is, whether it's going to clear $25 million, it might push up against $30 million per season. If he gets to 30, while it seems like a lot, you were just paying other aces $43 million a season. And this is a guy that you could build around. And I don't think it's crazy to say that the ceiling of Yamamoto is comparable to the ceiling of Scherzer and Verlander on a given year. That's how good this guy could be. And he's worth every penny to try to land him here and have him be one of the key pieces of your future. I think it's a slam dunk. And all the reporting that says that the Mets are all over him, they're really interested, he's their guy, I think it makes just too much sense. And that's why they're going to be out there for him. They're going to be the favorites going into it, I think. They're going to be a team that is going to submit a very aggressive offer, and hopefully that offer is able to land them. And I did a previous podcast you guys can find about Kodai Senga and how he factors into the mix. I really do think that does give the Mets an additional edge to have him in your corner when it comes to negotiating. But that's enough on Yamamoto for now. We'll continue to talk about him as the offseason develops here and we have more time on all this. But what I want to do to close the show is get right back to Bob Nightingale's reporting from the GM meetings, talk about how Craig Counsell never had any intention of signing with the Mets. We get to that next. First, another word from our sponsors. Let's now get to our last little news item from the weekend that was pretty interesting, and that was the fact that Craig Counsell never intended to take the Mets job, which isn't surprising. That's what we've assumed. But Bob Nightingale put it pretty flatly where he's like, yeah, he'd rather step away for a year than go 1,000 miles from home to manage the Mets. That was always the thing for him. It was always that stay home, which is okay. You could have just accepted the Brewers' contract and stayed home. Now your hometown kind of hates you, it seems like, because you went to the Cubs, but it was always those two things. It was getting paid and staying home. And I guess the thought was, hey, use the Mets as leverage and hopefully the Brewers meet your asking price. And then the Cubs come into the mix and it's the best of both worlds. You get a team with more resources that's going to sign you to that top dollar contract. And, you don't have to worry about going and deal with the pressure of managing the Mets and going all the way across the country. But again, I come back to the fact that this is a blessing in disguise for the Mets, that they didn't get so carried away in this, that they gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. That was just so head and shoulders above the market, where he ended up taking the position. I mean, look, if the Cubs don't come into the fray, as much as he can say now, or Bob Nightingale could ascertain now that, oh, he never would have done it. If the offer was, 4 years, $20 million from the Brewers, and the Mets were offering double that, like the Cubs ended up doing, you never know what would have happened. And in that scenario, if the guy is miserable away from home and he just took it for the money, it would have been such a bad precedent to set. He could be a great manager, but that is so much weighing on him. That level of expectation that is put on someone like him. I mean, look, Buck Showalter, dealt with it to a certain extent, right? Buck came in, a great manager, all these resources. The Mets should be awesome. And they were the first year. And then this year, we were all saying, fire the guy. And he did get fired. So, that pressure is going to be there no matter who the manager is. But when you throw in a contract that everyone's going to know the dollar amount on, that pressure would have been ratcheted up even further. And if you have a guy that's not living where he wants to, that's not, or that didn't take the job for the right reason, that didn't take the job because he saw it as the best place to contend, just took it for a paycheck, yeah, it wouldn't have worked. So instead, you get a guy in Carlos Mendoza that is getting his first crack. He's getting a chance to prove himself as a manager. That means more than anything. That's going to keep him focused. That's going to keep him in line. And a guy that wanted this opportunity that probably could be managing somewhere else if he wanted to. But he wanted to stay in New York. He saw the Mets as a team that was probably just an amazing fit in the sense that that if you believe in yourself as a manager, you're going to get some pretty talented players in New York. There's a lot of talented players already on the roster. And he also gets to stay where he was as the bench coach, living in New York City. He gets to continue that, with the Mets. So they ended up with a red hire, but it does make you like Counsell less when you get the report that he never would have actually come to the Mets. He'd rather take a year off. Seems a little bit drastic. I don't know, maybe the history of the Mets recently, I shouldn't be surprised by that information. Regardless, that's going to be all for today's show. Seems like, speaking of managers, Carlos Mendoza may be finally announced on Monday and could meet with the media on Tuesday. So that'll probably be a show this week, maybe on Wednesday for tomorrow's show, unless there's some big news item, unless they push Mendoza in front of the media earlier than expected. I'm going to give my open plea to Steve Cohen to continue to spend aggressively this offseason. Until then, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show, Locked On Mets.